So, welcome to tonight's live chat with the Online Citizen. Thank you all for joining us here on this program. Let the numbers do the talking. This is our 9th session. Last week we didn't have a session because we had something ad hoc. So yeah, today we're gonna continue again. So for those people who are not aware, I'm Terry Shi, and co-hosting the show with me is Mr. Leong Zihian.
Hello, everybody.
Yes. So once again, our special guest with us tonight is Mr. Martin Gabriel, a veteran human resource consultant who joined us in our previous session. So for those people who did not join us for the previous session, Mr. Gabriel has been in the human resource industry for 30 years and provides consultation services to companies in Singapore on human resource matters. So thank you, Martin, for joining us here today again.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So tonight, right, we will not be touching on what we covered the last session. Today, we would cover more on the issue of minimum wage and also bits and pieces on the complaints made by the locals in regards to discrimination from employers. So maybe to start off, Martin, could you share with us your thoughts on the implementation of minimum wage in Singapore? Because currently what we have is a progressive wage scheme, a model that is introduced for three industries, if I'm not wrong. That is the cleaners, the security guards, and the landscaping workers. Then that's the three industries, so it doesn't cover the rest. And I understand from Martin that this PWM also does not apply to people who are employed by the companies themselves, but more of people who are contracted. So Martin, maybe you can start off with the session by sharing your thoughts on that.
Okay, minimum wage. Now, I think there are two schools of thoughts when it comes to minimum wage. There are those who will say that if you impose minimum wage, what will happen is that it will add burden to companies, and companies may, lay off some people because they might not be able to meet the minimum wage that is imposed. Then there are those who would say that a living wage is an ethical thing to do. Paying someone a decent salary would, enable them to at least live out their working life adequately, and that that amount would just give them a respectable, decent life. So you have these two schools of thoughts, but it's never, ending, right? So you have and data cannot support one, without the other one also having data to support. So you get this thing going, back and forth. But I would think that if we're going to talk about the minimum wage tonight, we also have to touch on the PWM, which is the progressive wage model, and compare how these two can complement each other rather than to say that we must have one or the other. It can actually be both. So if I'm looking at it from the outside, and I'm thinking that the PWM basically is building up the wage over the years, right? It's building up the wage over the years, and some of the requirement is basically training requirements. Okay, but before we go into that, let me just touch on the scope of coverage. Who does this PWM cover first? And then from there, once we have the facts, it is easier to get into the details. Okay, so the PWM covers mainly Singapore citizens and PR, right? And as you have said, the three industries, that's the cleaning, the security, and the landscape sector. So these three are covered under the PWM. Now, it started in 1st September 2015. Now, the thing here is that we must understand that it's basically for outsourced workers. is not in-house. So if a hotel hires a security guard, that security guard, is not bounded by the requirements under the PWM. The PWM requirements is basically for outsourced workers. So take note of that first, all right? Secondly, foreign workers are not covered, right? Not covered. Once I say Singapore citizens means foreign workers are not covered. So then there is an alternative to foreign workers. Now, does that make foreign workers look more attractive? If the PWM, the wages starts to go up, does it, give foreign workers a leg up? So you have to look at that. The other thing we need to note is also that the PWM is not governed by employment law, right? It's not in the Employment Act or the foreign employment. So no, we won't be foreign employment because it only covers Singapore citizens. It's not in the Employment Act, but it's basically regulated by licensing, right? So cleaners is by the NEA, security, I think by the police force and the private security licensing, and landscape is under the NParks, right? So these are basically the facts that we have to know first before we go into talk about the progressive wage. Now, the requirements are all mandatory, right? The minimum salary that they impose. And what happens is that this minimum wage that is in the PWM, it will increase, incrementally, it will go up over the years. And the requirement is basically the employees will have to go through some training programs. And as they earn their training, their module or whatever, then their salary will start to climb. So if I'm looking at the security firms, security officer now in 2021 will have to be paid 1,004, and by the time they reach 2024, security officer will be paid 1,530. Right? So all these are you can find it in the MOM's website, which I'm actually looking now. And the security officer can go up, can be promoted right up to the senior security supervisor, which the starting pay will be about 1,985, and progressively it will increase to 2,169 by the year 2024. Right? So these are the fact finding that we have. Okay. Same for the landscape worker. Right now is about 1,550, and then by next year 1,650 for a landscape worker, and then a landscape supervisor can earn 2,250 and up to 2,450. Now the question here is, can companies pay this amount? If the task does not improve, so if you're doing the same task and the salary goes up, will it affect the competitiveness, right, of the job? That's one of the areas. So some people would say that companies will be forced to innovate. Companies will be forced to innovate and to improve their productivity. Remember, your salary cannot increase and leave productivity behind, right? It should always be behind productivity. That means productivity improve first and your wages must be behind it. Then you will remain competitive.
Okay, Martin, let me ask you the first, let the numbers do the talking question, numbers question. You mentioned the need to, pay a decent wage. Do you have any remarks or how do you explain the fact that we have 12,000 full-time workers who earn less than $500 a month? We have 39,000 full-time workers.
39,000.
We have 12,000 who earn less than $500 a month. We have 39,000 who earn less than 1,000. And we have 139,000 full-time workers who earn less than $1,500. And these are including the typical 20% employee CPF
the lower
contribution, And a full-time worker, of course, is typically someone, I understand, who works about 44 hours a week. So do you have any comments
That's
on
the
this?
maximum.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's first look again. Let's look at the facts. Now, the workers we are talking about are all covered under the Employment Act, what we call the Part 4 of the Employment Act. Part 4 of the Employment Act, basically, the workers are evaluated, not evaluated so much, but based on the hours they put in, right? So there are two types of workers that's covered under the Employment Act. What first one we call the outcome-based workers. So your managers, your PMEs, which we were talking about in the last session. Now these people are what we call the outcome-based worker. So they're not really the employer don't look at the hours they put in, but more on the result, the outcome. So if you're a manager and you're not at your table, you could be having coffee outside. Your manager should just your boss should just look at you and say, okay, you can go and do whatever with your time. But at the end of the day, you must produce the result, right? Now, for those workers who are under the PWM, they are hourly based. So as what you just said, 44 hours. This only applies to the workers who are under Part 4 of the Employment Act. And I did say it 2 weeks ago. For white collar workers, it's 2,006 and below. For blue collar workers, it's 4,005 and below. Now, if you fall in these categories, then you are what I would say hourly based, right? And you are in the, well, you could say the lower status of the employee category. Okay. So now coming to your question, you said that there are people who earn only $500. Are they working 44 hours or are they part-timers?
They are full-time workers, meaning they work at least more than 35 hours a week. I understand the typical is probably about 44 hours.
Yeah. So as the saying goes, the devil is in the details. So I really need to look at the job scope. Understanding the job scope will then, we will be able to tell why are they being paid $500 a month, which is, I would say, it's just pocket money, right? So we need to understand that, but if you're saying that somebody is paying like 1,004, 1,003 and working 44 hours, then yeah, in the labor intensive industry, right? Petrol pump station, F&B, and cleaners now also, they are earning about there. In fact, interestingly, the Workers' Party actually proposed, I think last year at the last election, the minimum wage was 1,003, right? And now if you look at general cleaners, they are getting 1,236, which is very close to what the WP actually proposed. Yeah. So I really need to know when you give these numbers of $500, $800, or $1,000 and all that, to actually look at the job scope and to understand. Right? So one reason why I think the government is hesitant to impose minimum wage, it could be, I'm just speculating, it could be that if you impose a minimum wage, then all these small activities, there are sometimes, people might say, okay, I pay you 500, 600, you just do this and do that for me. And on that basis, the person who's being offered the contract will look and see whether, it's worth that value. That if I get $600, what do I get? Do I have flexi time? Do I really work 44 hours, or do I work maybe above the benchmark of, okay, so a part-timer falls what? Someone who doesn't work for more than 35 hours, right? So anything 34 and below will be considered a part-timer. So if someone gets an offer for 36 hours and being paid, let's say $800, but maybe there is the benefit is, okay, flexi time, you work when you want, you work from home, or you do something that is very task-driven, output-based, like deliver newspaper and all that, then that person might look at it and say, okay, that's a fair amount. Okay, but on the other hand, if let's say all these jobs and then the minimum wage comes in and say that even if a person who works, as long as he works, 35 hours and above, whether he delivers newspaper or he sells drink and all that, hawker assistant, you must pay 1,004. So that's where the area comes in, where employers might think that I don't think that it's worth 1,004, it's worth less than that, and so all these activities may either stop or the employers will need to enhance the job scope, so that if I pay you 1,004, you don't just deliver newspaper for me, you do other things. So what we will call the Goldilocks zone, where we need to find that Goldilocks zone where that job is worth 1,004 as minimum wage.
But okay, on this point, this is what would have to rely on a level playing ground to begin with, because say if it's the same thing with the PWM only pertains to Singapore citizen and PR, if I'm not wrong. So in that sense, right, a foreign worker would not be eligible for a PWM. Meaning if the person is working in the cleaner, the landscaping, and also the security, the person would not be entitled to that wage. So while we would have the local worker being assured of a certain sum, but the foreign worker will be paid at a much lower wage. So we would face this issue of the employer might prefer a worker who he or she could pay at a lower wage, and that's the big problem. And of course we have this thing about the levy, the quota, but ultimately it still becomes a question of price rather than the issue about quality. Wouldn't you say so?
Yeah, okay. So as I mentioned earlier, so now it becomes there is the foreign worker, and this is only for outsourced workers. So companies might just be tempted to say, I'll hire a foreign worker, right? I'll pay the levy and all that. And this foreign worker, I don't have to be bounded by the minimum wage of the PWM. So that could be. What I fear is that employers might do this. So instead of going into PWM, then they might think, okay, I hire, instead of outsourcing the cleaning services, I hire a foreign worker. And so if the foreign workers, I mean, they're quite hardworking, because they are here, right? If I get the foreign worker, then what I will do is I'll try to focus on getting foreign workers rather than go into PWM. Now, I'll share a secret here. Some companies, what they might do is this, and I've seen it. Different sectors got different quota percentage.
Right.
If you're in the construction sector, you're eligible to having more foreign workers, right? There have been cases where cleaning companies, of course I won't mention the companies, cleaning companies actually apply for work permit and declare that they are construction, but these workers were being used as cleaners, right? There are those who got caught, and of course they get fined. But then there is this cat and mouse game where employers might think, okay, if the workers get too expensive. So now we're looking at a wage of 1,236 for general cleaners, right, in the hawker centers and all that. If they get too expensive as the years go on, will that be a side effect where employers start to look at and start to try and get more work permits rather than go into the PWM? So again, to me
it's somewhat like cat and mouse, isn't it?
It is a cat and mouse in terms of the authorities trying to find out if there's any false declaration from the employers where workers who are declared as in the construction sector are not under the construction sector, but under the workers declared as cleaners, but not under the cleaning sector, but under the construction sector, because construction sector gives you higher eligibility to get the work permit. And of course, companies, they can always register as construction. So that might happen. That might happen. Now, for me, if you look at the PWM, I would say that the lack in scope, because it excludes people like in the F&B, it also excludes construction, and it excludes retail, right? It excludes all this, and these people are not paid highly too, right? And it ties up with training programs, right? So companies sometimes, when it gets too complicated, they find it a little bit challenging, and also it ties with the skills upgrading. So according to the government, you must go through training programs, you must improve your skills, then you can move to the next level where your salary will go up automatically, right?
But frankly, that doesn't make sense, is it? Because there are a lot of jobs that basically it's just an exchange of manual labor for the wage. Say, for example, the rubbish refuse collector. So their task is simply to do a job that is very essential, that is essential to ensure that Singapore remains clean. However, it is a job that many do not wish to do because of the accountability on all the waste that's involved. So in that sense, right, that job is not about being skilled in the sense of you having to be like take a like 20 days course, or is it 1 year's a degree session, but more of a personal sacrifice in terms of the time and also the effort in doing that particular job. And so therefore it cannot be that we have professions that you keep insisting, okay, you go for skill upgrading, and ultimately then you'll be assured that you will have this particular salary. And in fact, the employer can't even assure this, because it is you still have to make economical sense that how much I earn from running this business is going to be how much I'm going to pay you. So it still has to be of that nature, rather than say, oh, because you're so skilled and therefore I'm going to pay you more. What's your thought on that?
Okay, what you're hitting on is the HR sector, the HR area. So for us, human resource, it is actually our job to enhance the job scope. Okay, maybe I put it in a story lah,
Sure.
an example. Okay, so I went to this shopping center, right? And I also know the company that was doing the cleaning service. And when I tried to go to the toilet, it was flooded. And all the cleaners were just standing there. They were just standing there and waiting. So I said, who are you waiting for? The plumber, right? Because, right? And it took the plumber like, almost a whole hour before the plumber
Came.
arrived
Yeah.
to clear a choke,
Yes.
right? So I spoke to the boss. I said, look, of course, you have all this PWM coming in. You need to enhance the job scope. Now, to me, those who clean toilet and basic plumbing can go hand in hand, to me, as a HR person. So I asked the supervisor, I said, the manager, I said, why don't you guys train your plumbers to do train your cleaners to do basic plumbing work, right? And later on, they will administer, after cleaning the toilet, you have this chemical where you pour in and all that to ensure that there's, and you leave it overnight, then there won't be a choke and all that. So administer something where you can avoid having a choke, stopping work for almost an hour, waiting for the plumbers to come. Plumbers clear the choke, then you continue. So that's not productive. So if I look at the job scope, and I see whether it can go hand in hand with other duties. By adding other duties to the job scope, you enhance the value of the job scope, right? You put in more value, then that person has the right to earn more. Another example would be when I go to the petrol station, the guy who pumped my petrol. Now that's a task, and that's an easy task. Right? No disrespect to that job. Pump petrol, I think I need to show you once and you know how to do it. But if that guy, the petrol pump attendant, learns how to check engine oil, check radiator water and all that while the car is being refueled, then that person has added skills, has added value to that job scope, right? So when you increase a person's salary, you must also enlarge the job scope. Then that job will be of higher value than just the task. So these are very task-driven job, labor-intensive job, right? So that's a HR part where you pointed out, Terry.
Okay.
Yeah?
Okay. How about I'm not sure whether are you aware of a recent report that's on on a technician. Was it technician? Yeah, it's a servicing technician, aircon servicing technician, who was working under ST Synetics. So this person was, this Indian national, if I'm not wrong, was found guilty of causing a fire at the police division HQ after throwing a cigarette at the rubbish bin filled with cardboard. So, but that's not the crux of the story. The crux of the story is that this technician is paid $800 a month servicing aircon, and is hired by a government-linked company servicing at the police headquarters. I believe I went to check. The contract seems to be under the Ministry of Home Affairs. But my point here is, right, you see, this job, right, of servicing aircon, any local worker who has the aspiration of retiring here in Singapore, right, take up a job that is paid $800. And I think that itself is the key of this problem about minimum wage. You know, there of course, technician might not be the best example, but and going to your example of at the petrol chaos, you know, all these jobs, right? If you can't really start to compare them in terms of the skills required to do their job. What we want to probably consider when it comes to minimum wage, right, it's not about how much you can get back from the wages paid to them, but whether or not the person can survive with the wage that's being paid. And so minimum wage is not something that the companies consider, because to them, right, it's the minimum I pay, the better it is. But for the country, for the manpower policy wise, it is to ensure that each individual who aspire to live in the country, to retire in the country, to build a family in the country, will be able to earn enough in order to secure a livelihood for their family, and also, most importantly, to pay for all the other expenses that one would require in order to live in dignity. And with the current model that we have, it seems to be like really reaching to the bottom of the barrel when it comes to like so-called the securing of how much wage you can have, and it seems to be a very complex issue in Singapore particular, because if you were to look at other countries, you don't have this introduction of a unlimited pool of foreign labor, where you can never have a market correction in terms of how much is too much, because you will come to a point of too much that people think it's cheaper to hire from overseas. But in Singapore's context, it's always cheaper to hire from overseas, and therefore you cannot have a market correction to say that, okay, this is the amount that one should be at minimum be paid. And then you have another complex problem, a complex issue of economics. Because the thing is, if people continue to be paid so low, local workers continue to be paid so low, they are unable to spend. They are unable to spend, unable to buy, unable to consume. And this in turn create a problem for a lot of companies where they are unable to earn because no one is buying anything or spending on the stuff, and therefore say, oh, I don't earn enough money, and therefore I cannot pay you enough. And then this really is like a dive, is a vicious cycle of people not able to buy and not able to earn, and then and eventually we come to a point where the people who are surviving are the tauges, the business owners that hire cheap labor and manage to run business, and then the foreign workers who basically can work at a cheap rate, like for example the $800 aircon technician, and then they save up, and then they will retire. They would when the time comes, they will just go back to the country and then retire. But what about the local workers that they have a span of 40-50 years down the road, and because of this consideration that they are going to spend decades here, they are definitely will be unwilling to go into professions that have no security when it comes to not just employment, but security in terms of appreciation of wages, or at least to pay enough so that they can survive.
Let me add on to Terry's question. You know, in the MOM website, there's a foreign workers quota calculator. No? So before coming here, I went into the calculator. So under services sector, I think like aircon servicing and KTVs are all under services sector. So I key in 10 local employees. That means 10 Singaporeans or PRs. Then the calculator, the answer come out. Okay, this company with 10 local employees can have 1 foreign S-pass. Okay, 0 PRC work permit, and 5 Malaysia NA. I think NA is North Asia work permit. So wouldn't such a system, in a sense, perpetuate the outcome that a lot of employers will just use the calculator and max out the number of foreigners that they can employ, like what Terry is saying?
Yes, of course. That's why I said just now that the side effect could be companies could be concentrating on how do I get more foreign workers, the quota, and to falsely declare that they are in a different sector, rather than to look at the livelihood or the welfare of the employees, right? So because companies are very profit driven. But what you said is true in the sense of you're talking about spending money, and that, you know, so one school of thought is that if you have a minimum wage, people will have more money to spend. It can, you know, stimulate the economy. But what I'm looking at in Singapore is the danger. What's happening in Singapore is this: what you have is the wages, the disparity in wage, the gap is so wide, right? Those who are earning the what we so-called, we can say roughly the minimum, and the very high super earners is very wide. So I've seen payroll where somebody can earn as much as 40,000 a month, right? So I got a shock. I saw 40,000 a month, and someone earning $800 a month. So if you look those two, it's very, very wide. And let me touch on something that actually the government tried to do and failed. And I did, or during this 1996, I was actually in SNAP. There was the government was selling this base up wage. Can you all remember base up wage? 1996.
No, I can't. I don't.
Terry not born yet.
So base up wage.
1996.
Okay, 1996.
No, I'm born already. 1996, of course.
Now, base up wage was basically this. You've got this runaway salary of those super earners. If you earn, let's say, 20,000 a month, and you get an increment of 5%, and somebody earns $800 and get 5%, and you build up, you know, when compounded, right, you will find that the two wages will just move,
yes.
You know, North Pole and South Pole.
Yes.
Correct? Right? So $10,000, I get 5%, you 800, you get 5%, and then the following year you add 5%. The one with 10,000 will run away, and the one with 800 will find it very difficult to catch up. So base up wage was basically to stop the rewarding people who was basically getting higher salary based on seniority and loyalty. And again, if I bring in my HR scope and I see through the lens of a human resource person, then is the job, you know, the value of is the job growing and therefore justifying his salary increment? If not, then basically he's just getting more and more based on seniority and loyalty. Now, base up wage basically says that, and I won't go too much into it because it's a system that was forgotten already. It was conveniently forgotten. So base up wage basically says stop this person from earning so much more, but you have to really look at the job scope. And for those who are earning like 800, 900, the increment will be a percentage plus a quantum. So if you're earning $800, I'll give you a percentage, let's say 5% plus $100. $100 is a quantum, right? And this will be built up over the years, and of course, this is in the hope of catching up with the super earners. Otherwise, our society will be the very rich and the very poor. Now, what Terry you touch on is basically any economy in the world, any developed country, you must have a broad-based middle class. Once your middle class disappears, then the economy is affected. It is the middle class that really spend all the money, buy things and all that. They have that purchasing power. Right? So to me, a society will have like 60% of the society must be middle class. You've got maybe your 20% high earners, 10% the super earners, and then the lower percentile, the 20% lower percentile, who I believe are the ones that really need the minimum wage. I'm not saying minimum wage is no good. As I said, there are two schools of thoughts to it, And if you look at countries, now I've done some research. I look at Money Smart website. Sweden, Denmark,
Yes.
Iceland, Norway, Switzerland. These are developed countries, and they've got no minimum wage, right? But their wages are attractive. I mean, in terms of their lower earners.
Correct. In fact, blue collars earn more than white collars.
Yeah. But why is this so? So we really have to look deeper. Why is this so? Because they've got a functioning, well-run union, right? And there's, this process of collective bargaining going on, where the unions will, really fight hard.
But again, you see, the labor union can fight on the basis that there's a demand for the labor. There's a demand of it, even if the labor costs. So it's really so you have a bargaining chip because your business need to operate with all this labor workforce, and you still can stand to earn. It's just about matter of how much you earn. But you and I okay. Before I interrupt you anymore, maybe you could touch on minimum wage for say places like Hong Kong, say Japan, Taiwan, Australia. So these are more like closer to us. So I think that would give us a better understanding of how minimum wage would probably affect, because the common I think straw man that the current administration would like to paint is that if we were to introduce a minimum wage, right, company will go bust, the economy will fall, and then a lot of people will lose their jobs. But what's your thought on that?
I don't agree with that. I believe that many developed countries have introduced minimum wage, and the economy did not collapse. Right? I think if I can quote Professor Tomiko in the past, he said that when he was fighting for 5-day work week, at one time Singapore was 6-day work week, right? Among the civil service, the government didn't want to allow 5-day work week. But when 5-day work week was introduced, our economy didn't collapse. Right? People don't mind working longer on weekdays, but they prefer Saturdays. They don't have to wake up so early and all that, right? So I don't think it will collapse because there are many developed countries that have introduced minimum wage, right? And the economy did not collapse. But I do think that there will be some adjustment along the way. Yeah. So if I will look at it from the government perspective, I'm thinking that they are trying to introduce it in an incremental way. And I think Ravi Menon, is it?
Yes, Ravi Menon, yes.
MAS chairman,
yes.
Is he the chairman? He did say that, perhaps we may have to look at minimum wage. Okay, my prediction. The implementation of minimum wage is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It will keep coming back, it will come back and come back to pressure the government to go into minimum wage. It's just a matter of time. Now, how long that it will take, I don't know. But I'm quite sure, because most of the advanced economies have introduced minimum wage, including Malaysia, who is close to us, and I believe it will happen one day. But if I can touch on your point on that we have access to cheap labor, is that your point just now when you were saying that all the foreign workers and all that?
On what? On the issue, the difficulty of implementing a minimum wage, or
no, the access to cheaper labor.
I think it's manifold. So you have the bargaining power of the labor union. That's one, because it's not that you have the exclusive control of labor. That's one thing. The other thing is about competition in terms of wages for an employer if we were to hire. So it's manifold, but because you have this introduction of a external source of labor market, it becomes that the market cannot correct itself. By right, it should have been the demand will match, slowly will match what's the reasonable price to pay for this service. But because you're able to access a market that is much cheaper and does not conform to so-called or wouldn't say reality, but the practicality of like example, having to save up to retire to pay for stuff here, people are able to live on a much lower wage.
Let me add to what Terry has just said. I want to give you some of the numbers so that there is some context to our discussion on the, like you say, it's not a matter of whether it's going to happen, it's a matter of timing, and the inequality gap. You see, the previous year, the full-time workers earning less than $500 was 4,000. But the last year, the 4,000 increased to 12,000. 200% increase of full-time workers who are earning less than $500. Now, of course, I can go on to 1,000, 1,005. So like you say, it's a matter of time, right? Because you keep on seeing the numbers that, more and more people earning, not even survival wages, then you have a problem. And then your inequality gap, let me give you the numbers. Households that earn more than $20,000 is 190 over 1,000. Households that earn less than $3,000 is 167,000. And this 3,000 or over 20,000 is including the employer's CPF contribution. That means 20 plus 17, 37. So you can see the huge gap. The number of households earning more than 20,000, 190 over 1,000, is even more than the households that earn less than 3,000 at 167,000. Do you have any further, remarks, on this?
Yeah, the numbers I don't know. I mean, you have a reliable source, I hope.
Yeah, this is all from
Census.
MOM and the Department of Department of Statistics. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Now I agree with you that the wages are, the wage gap is very wide. That I agree with you. And I also agree with Terry that there is this access to cheaper foreign labor, right? Okay, so if you look at the cheaper foreign labor, then of course then the government will have to regulate that. And I think we touched on this at our previous discussion, remember, 2 weeks ago, right?
Yes.
I did say that the growth was exponential and that the government will have to regulate this, right? The other thing I also agree with you is that it may not be a level playing field, right? Because the alternative is much cheaper. And usually companies will look at just the price, they don't look like how he look, the job scope and all that. And if they see the price is cheaper and they think that maybe I can just train this person to do the job, that's enough, right? So when they have access to this, of course, then the level playing field is not the same, right? So I believe that then Singaporeans will have to step up and move away, which is why previously, 2 weeks ago, I said we cannot do these transactional jobs. Because if you do this transactional job, then you're going to compete with the foreign workers who are much cheaper, right? And they can do the transactional job at a much cheaper rate.
Okay, this is where I sorry, but I need to interrupt you. It is ironical that we are talking about this transactional thing being not sustainable, because it is far more profitable for a person who is in the transactional industry, for example in a private hire or as a food delivery service, than to be in a full-time job that is not on a transactional basis but like skilled work. I give you an example, like say if you're you are a factory technician, a factory engineer, you might earn lesser than a person doing full-time, you're putting out the same effort, the same time as a person in the food delivery service or a private hire. Because why would I say that? In fact, I believe the figures would probably point towards that as a reality, is because these two particular jobs, meaning the food delivery and the private hires or taxi drivers, have protection from the introduction of foreign labor. People who are foreign, people from our neighboring countries, right, cannot come into Singapore and then decide to sign up as a food delivery service person, and that is why the companies still would have to chase for the local workers, the locals, to provide the services, and then we can see that people are still willing people are still willing to pay for that hike up amount because to them it's still financial viable because I save my time. I don't have to go out down and buy my food, the food that I like to eat. So from this we can see that we can have a market correction in terms of the demand and then how much people are willing to work for jobs that might not be attractive to people in terms of finding a career because people just want to have the security of earning enough so that they can fend for their family. Yeah.
Hey Terry, you asked for the number, I give you lah. You're right. The number of private hire drivers and taxi driver has been increasing. The number now is about 80,000. A lot, right? It keeps going up.
Yeah. And as people commenters highlight, Patrick Hing highlighted, foreigners are not allowed to do this transactional jobs. For example, the social distancing ambassador. So all these jobs, right, although it does not make sense to be in this type of jobs, especially in terms of the long run. However, because they are protected, from cheap foreign labor, and therefore they are able to be paid. Or I wouldn't say they are able to. Is the employers are compelled to give more attractive wages in order to compel people from stepping up. Because if they don't, then the business model would not work because you can't find locals willing to. Because if you pay any lower, it becomes volunteering. Because what do I get from working for you if I were to go and work for that? Yeah, it's the same thing. No, because how many families nowadays, both of them are breadwinners, so they go out and then breadwinners, and then when they have kids at home, they have to go and hire caretakers, or they have to throw their kids at the nursery, and therefore their pay must justify both of them going out and then earning enough in order to pay for all these expenses. So if you again using back to the $800 technician, right? If the parent were to go and take up this type of job, right, it's like they are reimbursing the company for their work time. So it's about having value for ensuring that there's value for the worker. There's a fair transaction of the labor and then the rewards being gotten from the employer. Yeah.
Okay, that is not that I don't agree with you on the minimum wage. Yeah, I'm just looking at the nuts and bolts.
Yes.
Of how you administer it, how you implement it, and coming back to those jobs where you say that they do the transactional work because it pays better than certain jobs, right? You were saying. The problem is that and I think we touched on this previously. There's not enough PME's job, and the PME's job are going to the foreign PMEs, right? The EP holders. And so because there's not enough of this job, then the Singaporeans are now, sort of like pushed into the transactional jobs. And I did touch on this 2 weeks ago to say that this is very sad and that the government will have to look at the numbers, right, carefully, and to ensure, that there's a fair playing field. In the past, it was always like this, right? Okay, let's look through the government's narrative. In the past, it was, we bring in WP holders to do construction work. And the narrative was this. We bring foreign workers in to do construction work because it's a job nobody wants to do. Right? That was the narrative. Right? Now, they bring in the PMEs, right? It's not a job nobody wants to do. It's a job most of us want to do. But what's the narrative now? The narrative now is we bring in these PMEs so that they can create more jobs for Singapore citizens. So the narrative has changed. You want to say something?
Yes. I think that we were looking at the figures. I think last week, following the debate on CICA that happened in Parliament. So people started making noise on this particular CICA policy. It was introduced in 2005. The reason being that it's not because of people being racist, but this particular policy has touched the raw nerve of them, because it pushes them out from the job. But the thing is, people don't realize this, is that Singaporeans have previously in the 90s already been pushed out from jobs. Because if you look at the figures, the number of Malaysians, the number of people from from PRC have exploded in numbers following former Prime Minister Goh Chok Tong's policy to open up, to liberalize the foreign labor market. So it's not that people are not wouldn't want to work in the jobs that they are taking over. Frankly, a lot, particularly because people of a certain generation, their education level is not really that high. So they are of the primary school, secondary school level. So you there's a limit to how much they can upskill. So which is why they would stick with a certain tier of profession that basically do not need them to be like highly educated, but yet still be paid enough. However, with the introduction of foreign labor in the 90s, also correct me if I'm wrong, in the 90s, early 2000, right, people are priced out from this market. Whether is it in the cleaning, whether it's as cleaners, whether is it in terms of like the technicians, or even roadside sweepers. These are people, and this is why, right, now in terms of this profession, you can only see really old individuals in this particular profession, because for them, they have no choice, because they, for the other people in the let's say in the 30s, 40s, right, they can still force themselves, try to upscale a bit, right, and then shift up to a profession. But so now, right, or on why people are so uptight about Sika is that they have been initially been forced from a low ground, right, to high, because the sea level has increased. But now, right, you could still continue to raise the sea level somehow. Everyone will get swarming at the hill already, but you're still raising the bar so much, right? There's a limit, right? Not everyone have the opportunity to be on the tower. Everyone now everyone this Facebook, I won't be banned. So everyone is now cluster fucking at the bottom part where people are just trying to survive. It's not about like it's no longer saying in the 90s where people are trying to get a good future. People are just trying to survive at the current in this current climate.
Hey, Terry, since you asked, I give you the number again. And Martin, you talk about PMEs. Here are the numbers. Recently, you were disclosed in Parliament in the last 15 years, from 2005 to 2020. PME's job growth was 380,000. What is PME job growth? Locals are Singaporeans and PRs. But in the same period, 15 years, 2005 to 2020, we granted 635,000 new PRs. Now, if 60% of the 635,000 new PRs are in the workforce and are PMEs, the figure comes up to almost exactly the same as 280,000. So in the last 15 years, you have 280,000 foreign PMEs who were converted to local PMEs and therefore counted as local jobs growth. So how many of the 280,000 actually went to a Singaporean PME? You know?
Okay, and before we detract from the topic of this live chat, is about the issue of a minimum wage. And the thing here is, a lot of locals, they're not saying that I must work in as a PME or T and a T. It's just that in Singapore, the current day Singapore is only where you're in the PMED sector that you can get a livable wage. So it's not about people trying to cling on to this, or I must be a manager, I must be an engineer, or I must be someone of authority. People want to have these jobs because they pay enough to secure a acceptable lifestyle. So if we come to a day where even as a cleaner you can earn enough, you can still live the same lifestyle as a manager, And then people would just say, no, I don't care. I just want to be a cleaner. And that's what happening, right? Not in Singapore, I'm saying. It's like, say, in Australia. I think Australia is a better example. Say that a cleaner, a construction worker can earn enough, in fact, earn more than a person, let's say, in an administrative job.
Yeah, that's why I particularly like what Rami Menon said. I think he said something along the lines of, let's not focus too much about PMETs or non-PMEs. Let's try to professionalize every job or something. I think that was a very good comment by Rami Menon.
Okay.
Yes.
You see, the minimum wage issue,
Yes.
I think our government basically, they crunch numbers. They don't really touch the ground or sense it. But what they don't see that it's becoming an ethical issue rather than just crunching numbers. So if they keep putting forward just the numbers, they will find that they are disconnected from the ground, disconnected from people's emotions. Because from where we are coming from, we are looking at the lower 20%, the lower wage earners, and we are thinking, how do we help them, right? Now, in my opinion, if I were to look at it, I would say minimum wage can be the baseline, right? Let's say it's 1,000, 3,000, 4,000. This is debatable, okay? Because there's a myriad of factors to look at, your lifestyle and all that. Let's say 1,004. And then if you want to have your progressive wage model on top of it to improve the security sector, the cleaning sector, go ahead. Then it's an added value rather than that playing the role of minimum wage, because that PWM cannot play the role of minimum wage simply because the scope is limited, right? The scope is limited, and there will be people who will fall through the cracks, like those working in F&B. Although they did say that they are slowly going to implement into different sectors. To me, you do across the board blanket, it will be better, right? And you can use your progressive wage model to help improve each sector in a surgical way. And I think we covered more on the PMEs, and yeah, I get it, that there are too many PME jobs going to foreign PMEs. I think we touched on that 2 weeks ago. And Leong, also, I get your numbers. So what you're saying is basically the statistics can be skewed because there was a lot of conversion of PR to Singapore citizens. And
no, conversion of foreign PMEs to new PMEs who are then counted as local job growth.
So I get that also. So that's why they crunch numbers, and when you just crunch numbers, of course, you can see it how you want to see it, right? You can see it in many different ways, right? So if they cannot connect, right, and see the ethics behind why there's a call for minimum wage, then I would say that, I don't know, they just ignoring it. But again, it will not go away.
I think one very good thing we can see, right, from the lack of minimum wage, or say the lack of purchasing power from Singaporeans, right, can be easily observed in this current pandemic. For the longest of time, I think for the last 10-20 years, Singapore economy has been reliant on foreign spending. Tourists, foreign businessmen coming into Singapore and spend. And this is a problem that is brought about, like what you highlighted. The middle class do not have enough to spend, enough spare cash. You're not talking about they have no money to pay for their expenses. They have, but the thing is, these are crucial expenses. Example, the kids upbringing, the cost of kid upbringing, the saving up for medical costs and mortgages. But you, in a developed country, you ought to have money to spend for leisure, for recreational purposes, for mental health, basically. So, whereas I think in Singapore, you don't have that luxury of doing that. So people are surviving, but they're not really doing that well. And from this pandemic, we can see we can observe the problem of such an economy where we rely on this foreign spending in order for the whole economy to function, and how Singaporeans essentially do not have enough to spend.
Okay, I agree with you there. Maybe what I can do is, you see, we have observed, right, and you have rightly observed to say that mostly at the older people who will do, let's say, cleaning job, even security, mostly at the older people. Now, if I look at this, it's basically, you know, when you go through life, your priority changes, right? Why are the older people there? One is because they probably have, maybe they have retired already from a previous job, right? And we were talking about the fast food, right? That you have quite a fair number of older workers. So these older workers, they already have their HDB flat, children all grown up. So their priority is just, you know, pocket money. And so they just want to occupy their time, and they don't mind doing cleaning jobs. However, if you look at, touching on what you said about those in the 30s, 20s, 30s, their priority is to set up a home, right? You cannot set up a home if you become a cleaner and you earn, what's the wage now? It's 1,236 for general cleaners. And most likely, again, I'm quoting you,
Yes.
highly educated, right? Those who are of a higher education, and as time goes by, you will find that the cleaners will also find difficult to recruit Singaporeans, because most of the people are, as time goes by, you know, people are getting higher and higher educated, right? So they will not want to be cleaners. And the cleaning industry, they have this identity crisis, you know. Nobody wants to go around and you know, say, I'm a cleaner. I mean, let's be honest here. We have that, you know, pride, right? That we rather have a white collar job.
I disagree, because if the problem with the pride about the issue about pride telling people that you are a cleaner is because you're paid $1,000 over for that job. Over here, I believe it's the connection of how much you earn as the sense of dignity. That say if I tell people I'm a civil servant, so probably people roughly know how much I earn, and based on appointment roughly know how much I earn. So the lack of sense of dignity, or like you feel shameful, right, telling your kid that you are working this profession, is because of the amount of money you earn. So if you if you're a cleaner who basically earn $5,000 a month, you can just go around and tell people, say, I'm a cleaner, and people will envy you and say, wow, where you get this job? So it's not a label that's it's not the label that's the issue. It's the salary that's connected to this. In fact, PWM clearly shows you that this industry, you get this price. And so it's not about like the stigma to this industry. It's the price of labor in this particular industry.
I tend to agree with Terry. It's the money lah, you know. Let the money do the talking. I just give you one funny number, you know. I give you one funny number. Our total fertility rate is at its lowest ever, you know, and we are like the second lowest in the whole world. So I think very simple. The reason is money not enough. So how to get married, how to have baby, right?
Okay, just a question. How much do you think a cleaner should earn?
Now is it? I believe, right, it should be market would have to depend. The market would have to determine. So for example, right, in HDB, for example, how much is the average household willing to pay for the disposal of refuse? And that amount, right? Say, and there's this implicates another problem in Singapore: the cost of middlemen, because contractors take up most bulk of the expenses, whereas I think it's more than 50% when it comes to, like, say example, for every $1 you pay, right, more than 50% go to the middleman's profit, which is really, I would say, this is really toxic. But then, okay, that's distracting a point. So say if everyone's willing to pay $1, this block has 100 households. So for $100 for a month, this is an example. You can just explore it, and then how much of it will be go to the cleaner to do his job, his or her job. So it's the market will determine it, and if there's no people willing to do for $100, then the household would have to increase incrementally until a point where there a certain segment of the population is willing to do at that price.
Okay, I get what you say. The market will correct itself. Okay, the thing about the cleaning, I say the identity crisis. Okay, I have a client, doing cleaning actually. Now, when I spoke to him, he said, I cannot find people. So he was the one who said that there is this identity crisis where people don't, aspire to be cleaners. Now, I don't think, now no disrespect to cleaners, but I don't think a cleaner will earn $4,000 or $5,000 a month. Although maybe some European countries may pay more. I don't think any cleaning company would do that, because they look at cleaning as a job. Again, I have to put on my HR hat. In terms of the task that is done is a rather simple task. And in order to grow the job, as what I gave the example just now on doing basic plumbing and all that, to enhance the job, the job scope, so that then there can be justification for higher salary. Now, I'm not against minimum wage. I say again, I'm not.
Yes, I agree with that.
Whatever,
I don't disagree.
Yeah, whatever amount that we feel that should be a minimum wage, I feel okay. We can impose a minimum wage to ensure that nobody earns below what is a living wage. So he has taken a turn to call a living wage because basically that will give you a decent livelihood. Now, when I was talking about the priority of life, if you're in your 20s and your 30s and you're going to set up a home, you know that going into the cleaning industry will not enable you to buy a HDB flat or to live a comfortable life, right? So most of the cleaners that you find are older people, right? Aunties and uncles and all that, because they have already kind of have their HDB flat, grown up children and all that, and so they are thinking, okay, I just become a cleaner, I get 1,300, I don't have to disturb my children for money,
yes,
and I don't want to disturb them, I'm happy. But increasingly as the years go by, the people who are becoming older, comes into our generation, and these people are highly educated, you see. So it's going to be harder for the cleaning companies to recruit unless they have to, as I said, enhance the job scope, ensure that the job becomes, as what you say, respectable, so that you can be able to find these people. Now, in terms of again, I get you on the foreign workers who are coming in on the cheap. That is for the government to really look at the numbers and regulate the numbers, since they are so good at crunching the numbers, right? So it's a balancing game, I believe, that that they have to do, so that we can implement a minimum wage and ensure that anyone who wants to work will have a living wage, even though if they belong to the younger demographic, they can yeah. And again, our middle class is shrinking, right? This is my own opinion.
No. The middle class is still, in fact, is still the large part. The thing is, the middle class is earning lesser. To me, I think that this is my opinion, Yeah.
I see that they are the one now struggling. If they struggle, then the purchasing power will, and with this COVID,
the struggle. This is the problem I have with all this discussion. See, well, when we discuss issue about minimum wage, right? We tend to be just taking one issue at one time. Say about the cost of how much you need to be paid, or how much you need to justify the pay. But we don't think about a lot of other factors, which is the external pressure. Say those people working in McDonald's now, for example, as you mentioned, those people who can work for pocket money, right? This is a generation in which, right, if they will be working in the same job, particular job, right, 20, 30 years ago, right, they would have already paid off their HDB within 5 years. I think so, right?
Yeah. I mean,
right. 10,000
HDB when first started,
that's about
$3,000 for a
4-room, 5-room flat, $10,000 a
Yeah.
month. So within 5 years, they can pay off the fund. But this, our current or I wouldn't say our my current, okay, this current generation, right? You're looking at paying off a HDB flat that's $500 over $1,000 if you're going for a 5-room flat, and not that's not including the interest that you have to pay for that $500 over $1,000
The
flat.
compounded interest.
Yes, a compound interest that's a flat. So the pressure rate is going to be tremendous for the new generation. Not even for my generation, the future generation, it's going to be much worse. And the middle class, as just now you highlighted, the middle class, right, is, so the wage, okay, might not be dropping, but the pressure that they face is going to increase further, because the cost of raising a child is going to increase. The cost of paying for a flat is going to increase. The cost of medical bills for their parents is going to increase. So the pressure that the middle class face is going to be even much worse than what it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And before I go for that, let me just clarify. For Australia, for a service assistant cleaner, the hourly wage is $26 US, or not USD, Aussie dollar, $26. So a year, on a month, if 13 months is not a thing in Australia, this cleaner would earn more than $4,000 Singapore dollars, over 4,000 Singapore dollars a month, and this is definitely on top of a minimum wage that they have, because the minimum wage is based on a per hour basis. So it's about people willing, it's about companies and individuals willing to pay for the service, and especially for essential service, which people cannot but to pay for it. For example, if medical expenses were to increase, people either have to pay, because if I don't pay for that amount, which the market agrees that this is the amount that should be paid, then I have to treat myself up, because no one is willing to pay any to do it at a lower cost. And again, coming back to Singapore, the issue is, right, local workers don't have this choice of even bargaining, because the moment, right, before you reach a point where you are tempted to take this figure, someone will have raise your hand from overseas to say, okay, I'm willing to wait at this price, and this is the problem with minimum wage in Singapore. And I think we need to set up this ground for our discussion. Is that my belief is that foreign workers ought to also be paid the same minimum wage as the rest, because you look at, okay, let's not talk about all this like Dubai or what's that, Malaysia. Let's look at other developed countries. Which country that considered itself as a developed country would pay foreigners lesser? That means I'm not talking about people who are refugees. I'm talking about people who are registered foreigners who are coming on a valid work permit to be paid any lesser than a local. And this is a problem that I think that is the crux of the problem in Singapore. Why is it that we allow foreigners to be paid lesser than locals? And that creates a problem. Of course, you have some locals who think that, foreigners should not be paid more, because if we pay more, they will be more happy if they go back to their home country. But the thing is, why are you so bothered about that? Because end of the day, when Goh Chok Tong opened up the floodgates for foreign labour, the intent was to utilize foreign talents that Singapore does not have, to spur the growth of the Singapore economy. But that idea of benefiting Singapore has what's that? Convoluted, distorted into a chase for cheap foreign labor. And instead of having, in the past, we have this pride of, if a product is made in Singapore, it must be of top quality. So which is why I think they were at one point, Enterprise Singapore was trying to sell this made in Singapore idea.
Yeah, they had that uniquely Singapore, that the lion mark.
That's tourism. But I'm talking about the made in Singapore as a indication that or this product is made of quality, the QC. But moving to today, right, 20 years from 20, 30 years down the road, right, it seems that the sense of chasing for quality has dropped. It seems that really, so long I can deliver, then that's okay. That's a sense I get from the market.
Hey, since you're talking about HDB and minimum wage, let me tell you about minimum wage joke, okay? Now, more than a year before you apply for before you get your you want to get your HDB, more than a year before you change to a low wage job lah. No need to be cleaner lah. Something sound nicer. Then your household, then ask your spouse to stop working temporary for a year or more. Then your household income is less than 1,500. You get maximum housing grant of $80,000. You know, right? Then after you get your flat, then you go back to your normal job lah. So this is called the minimum wage joke. What do you think of that, Martin?
Okay, Terry. Let me come back to the.
Sure. Please do.
The what was that we was talking about? Those middle income. What we're saying,
okay, so the middle income facing increasing pressure.
Now, why I say that I think the middle, those in the middle income are shrinking, is because now I look at those above 40. You know, in those days when you're employed, it can be lifelong employment,
yes,
right? But now if you look at those who are employed, you reach 40 years old, they don't want you anymore, right? And you can go through your working life and you can get retrenched 2 or 3 times. There are people who get retrenched 2 or 3 times. So there's always these hiccups in between, and then you'll find it difficult to pay your mortgage and all that because of these hiccups right here and there. And because at 40 you find it difficult to re-enter the workforce, you know, you don't have you don't have your salaries anymore, and then you drop. Right, you drop out of the middle income, right, and then you struggle, right? You know, the last talk we did 2 weeks ago, there were people who sent me emails and say, I'm one of them. You know, I'm 50 years old now, 52, 53. I've not been working for 7 months, 8 months. I can't find a job. I can't even secure an interview, right? So the middle class is no longer broad-based or is no longer stable, right? And from what I see is that this uncertainty that goes along with being middle class puts a lot of stress on our workers also and on families. Now there's a side effect to this again. So people will have less children, right? They will have they will not commit to marriage and so forth. If you look at the data, I'm not sure whether Leong has this data. Apparently there are more singles now, living alone, dying alone, growing old alone also, right? So lifestyles have also changed. We have to acknowledge that the lifestyles have changed. Now coming back to the part, and you said, I agree with you that work permit holders, foreign workers should also have minimum wage. And I think in other countries, they are under the law also, right?
Correct.
It's not a selective kind of thing that, okay, if you're a foreigner, minimum wage don't cover.
There's no
you.
discrimination between locals and foreigners.
Yeah.
If you're
So
able to
it's
get
across the
in,
board.
if you're able to get in, you'll be paid the same. Yes.
Right. Now, if that is imposed to our workforce, then I think our Singapore workers will be more competitive than the foreign workers. Right? Because of the education and the language and so forth.
And most importantly, right, I think Singaporeans are not against foreign talents. As in, we appreciate people who are really worth their salt. Well, yeah, worth their worth.
Worth their salt.
Worth their salt. Like in experts in their various industries, and we need them to be here to help Singapore's economy grow, and also, if possible, as what Goh Keng Swee tried to bring about, is the transfer of skills. And frankly, I think over the past 2 decades, I think the whole idea of a skill transfer has totally gone off the roof. So yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
So,
do you think it may be less? Do you think it may be less salty, if I may say, less salty to introduce the minimum wage if we do it first for locals and then gradually for foreign workers? Do you think that will make it easier, more palatable, less salty? What do you think?
Sorry, say again.
No, that means make the minimum wage more easier to implement or less salty, you introduce a minimum wage for locals first, and then gradually increase it for foreigners.
You will not.
No?
The locals will get they get discriminated first. You actually expedite the whole process.
Oh, okay.
It will not work that way.
Complicated.
And frankly, like what the Workers' Party has mentioned, along with the NCMPs, right, is that this is the right period to really talk about minimum wage. This is the best time, because in a bursting economy, if you were to talk about, let's say, let's introduce minimum wage, then you would really throw a spanner into the gears of the whole thing, GDP growth. But at this point, right, how low can we go? Because the whole economy is on standstill, right? So and constructions are on hold, and all this various investment. So if you don't take this opportunity to introduce something of that has a resemblance of a minimum wage, when are you going to introduce? And Martin pointed out that it's not about whether should we, but it's a whether or when should we. And we should not be waiting for this eventuality, which would not be spurred by PAP's realization that minimum wage is the way to go, because they would not. If they're gonna be they would only do that when they are voted out of power, because it's not for them to control. So I don't think it's a right thing to say that minimum wage is something that should be left to the parliamentarians to decide, because they would not. To distract a bit, I think the best way to increase the wages of locals without an introduction of minimum wage is to tie the minister's performance bonus, tie the minister's wage to the bottom 20% of the Singapore labour workforce. Because the thing is, currently, right, I would say there's a conflict of interest. In what sense? A conflict of interest where the ministers are paid, their salary are plagued to the top 1,000 earners in Singapore. So instead of putting effort to increase the wage of the commoners, the normal Singaporeans, if I'm in the position where my wage is pledged to the top tier, of course I'll make their life easier, or try to improve their income, so that eventually when there's a revision of the salary, my salary, my wage would rise as well. So to spur them, which they strongly believe in terms of a carrot and stick approach, they should pledge their salary to the bottom 20, at least bottom 10-20% of the Singapore workforce, right?
Yeah, if not now, when? Right? Do not miss this golden opportunity,
Okay, maybe let me just pick up on some of the things
please.
will say so that we get both sides.
Yes.
Okay. Now, they will say that if you impose a minimum wage, of course, then companies will increase the business cost, and that they will run away. Some of them might go to, now in certain sectors I agree, like for example IT. Tomorrow, let's say, Leong, you want to do a website, you don't have to look for a company in Singapore to build your website for you. You can go to a company in India or Malaysia, where they will charge you less, and so the business can actually move there, you see. But that is because of the overall cost in Singapore is more expensive. The other thing is, of course, companies are, for my observation, companies tend to be inward looking sometimes. Inward looking means if I cannot make a profit, what I do, I look inside, I retrench staff, right? Or I try to get labor that is as cheap.
That's what SPH did.
So they are inward looking.
Yes.
Now, given the time of COVID now, no company will be expanding. In order for an organization to expand, the market must support it. If the market cannot support it, you cannot expand. So that's where companies will look inside, and they look at business costs, and they will try to reduce business costs. And we all know this. Business cost is highest at two areas: labor and the rental. If you can reduce these two, you save a lot of money. So my guess is that the government could be afraid that if the business costs increase and that labor becomes more expensive, then companies may react in that way. And remember this, the government cannot control every company, all the companies, unless they legislate. If they don't legislate in a free market system, companies, and I've seen companies looking inside to reduce their labor costs.
Martin, you exactly pointed out the thing. Government cannot control the companies. So to try and or to spur companies, encourage companies,
incentivize.
Not even incentivize. To encourage people, the companies to pass the income to the workers, right? It's pretty impossible. And we talk about there's not enough money, right, coming in or to spur the economy. One very recent example, where Singapore's how much did Singapore spend for the pandemic?
Okay.
Billion, right?
The budgeted COVID-19 budget size 90 billion.
Yes,
95 billion.
Yeah, but so far the drawdown on the reserves about 50 billion only.
50 billion. Okay, say 50 billion. We previously there was a calculation by Tim Pei Ling, right? So by right, let's say if 100 billion were to issue to all Singaporeans, right, each one will get about
23,000, is it?
23,000. So if we say 60 billion, that's half the sum, which is $12,000. So the thing is, my point here is, right, today, right, do we see the effect of that $50 billion other than saving companies? Saving companies that they could then pay their staff.
If my pay cut more than 50% for at least 3 months, I get $500 for 3 months.
Yeah, but so it's most of the efforts, right, that we see, right, seems to be on the corporates. We don't see the money being passed down to the people, which then, right, if right, the people had the money, right, you think people will save up the money? They will just spend, right? Most people, like in the middle class, they will just spend the amount, and that could easily spark off the whole gear to go. That's how economy works. And given that there's a lockdown, right, where can people spend their money? Of course, in Singapore. Right? So and what people can do with the $100 voucher, is it the SG? How much was the SG?
$100.
Right? What can people do with $100? People have to top up, to actually go and spend.
It makes you spend more money, lah.
Yeah. So
it's a teaser, lah.
Yes. So I think the thing here is Singapore is in the position to look at introducing minimum wage. Singapore has the resources to introduce minimum wage, but then of course people will then ask, why is it so hard? And going back to what you mentioned just now in terms of the Tomiko's statement, right? So Tomiko basically argued that Singapore's government apparent resistance towards implementing a minimum wage in the Republic is basically rooted in fake ideological arguments. I would say Dr. Koh is just being polite. The apprehension in terms of introducing a minimum wage, if I were to opine, is based that they don't want to empower the locals. When locals are no longer troubled by their basic needs, meaning they have to really go and really slog it out in order to have a living wage, they will start to think about other things, which is, can I live a better life? And touching back on your point about the Singaporean workers facing more and more retrenchment, right? Let's think back in time, 20 years ago in the 90s, people of that age, right, is thinking of how can I transfer to another company to earn more. Because I'm more experienced, right?
I must tell you this fact,
Yes.
When I finished NS, everything, then I looking for a job, 1974 or something. Well, apply 100 jobs, got 90 over offers. Those days really the demand and supply.
Exactly.
The HR
That's
people got
my
a big, a big headache because a lot of demand. Oh, before I forget, I must tell you this very funny joke. Since you talk about IT and what cheaper to use overseas and all that. My good friend Prabhu, he discovered that MOM, the Facebook, the people managing the Facebook, about 1/3 were from a foreign country as a location. So when Prabhu put it up, Then a short while later, then the number changed. Luckily, he took a screenshot of both the before and after. Can you imagine? MOM about 1/3 of the Facebook, the managing the Facebook, the location is not in Singapore but in a foreign country.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't know whether to laugh
global.
or
So the job can be outsourced, you see.
yeah.
But
Like
okay,
you said,
yeah.
and they did.
So let me just touch on one point. Okay, the other point is the wage structure. I think we can improve on the wage structure. Now let's look at our F&B, and they are not covered under the the PWM. Now, for me, I'm looking at the US system of a tipping culture, where you serve, you get tips. The companies are not passing on the 10% service charge to the employees. I think you know this, right?
Yes.
In fact, that money is just going to the company to help pay rent and all that, and they say that they are struggling and all that. So I think, I mean, if my idea can go through, we should have this tipping culture, promoted, and the government can also help, so that people who go to a restaurant and they find that the service is good, they tip the person. And from my HR perspective, motivation helps. If I give you a bonus once a year, it's kind of like, after I give you the bonus, you forget. 3 months later, you forget. But in a tipping culture, in a restaurant where tipping is encouraged, you also raise the standards, of service. Because every time a guest comes, you expect a tip, you perform well, or you give your best. And then you get the reward straight away when you feel tipping is based on experience, service experience and all that. So I think here that the wage structure can be looked at also, as not say to replace the minimum wage or whatever, but these are areas that I think the government can be more innovative, right? And I'm sure we have this restaurant association or whatever, and they can always promote tipping culture to help. And it just not on F&B, it can even be the petrol pump attendant and so on.
But
hey, so you watching? Give a small tip to Terry, okay?
No, but the thing here is, right, what that might apply to the Western culture, but but if we were to refer to, say, in the Asian region, so we talk about in China, and especially in particular Japan does not have a tipping culture. However, right, they have strong emphasis on the service quality that they provide for their customers, and the reason why they put so much effort in providing the service, it's of a culture that you are expected to perform to that level, and also they understand that with good service, customer will return. So I don't think that it is right to have a culture that to spur people to say for workers to respond to like this type of ad hoc payments. It should be where the company performs well, as in to earn money, get a lot of customers, right? The workers are in turn also rewarded at the same time. And that goes back to what you mentioned about the 10%. If the 10% is put together and then distributed amongst the workers, right, then you actually would do away with tippings, because the thing is, the better the company performs.
No, okay. Yes. I don't agree with you here, because when it goes through the employer's hands, when it goes through the company hand, it disappears. So a tipping culture, it goes straight to the person. It goes straight to the pocket. So here is where the employer doesn't have a hand in it, Yeah, so I've been observing restaurants and all that,
yes.
And most admit also, I think there were write-ups that the 10% don't go to the employee at all. And what will the restaurant say? We are struggling, with the high rent, and of course now with the COVID, some of the concerns are justified,
Like they're not passing the
It's like it's like rental waiver. Yeah, now finally they say must give already, must pass on. Finally.
Yeah, hold on. The other one is also if there is tipping culture, then the wages of the waiters or petrol pump attendant will go up, right? Because there is this, and it doesn't just go up like that. There is justification that it goes up, because who is the paymaster? It is the clients, right? It is the customers. And when the customers say, okay, I'll give you a tip, their evaluation is the most accurate, because they are the customers, right? So when the wages can go up and people can earn decent salary from benefiting from the tipping culture, then you will have more people coming into these sectors rather than now you say you're struggling, but at the same time you don't encourage tipping culture, you don't look at the wages. To me, you have to look at the whole myriad of different items to ensure that besides the minimum wage lah. So we are talking about minimum wage, I understand, but there are also other areas that we can look at to improve. Then overall, everything can improve together.
Okay. I have been a waiter before, so I can tell you.
Me too. I've been a waiter.
So if we say tipping culture, there's a lot of things, right? But that's not the topic today. So now it's 9:05. I think could you probably sum up in terms of your thoughts on to give a closing talk on the minimum wage. And at the same time, could the as in commenters, if you have any questions, right, you could just drop in the comments.
Okay, I would say that the minimum wage can be the baseline. I'm going to say the same thing again. The baseline and the PWM, I can see the merits of it. What they are trying to do is to increase the salary over time. And after certain amount of years, they will be earning about 2,000 something, right? The only problem is that it is limited to 3 sectors, right? And if let's say the security guard or gets a salary, let's say of 2,050 or 2,100, or the cleaners start to get, then will that have a side effect where people from other sectors like petrol pump attendant or people from the F&B may run over, and then suddenly you find you solve one problem but you create another problem, right? So it is best to have a baseline of the minimum wage, but the PWM can look at different sectors in a surgical way, and if they feel that they want to improve those sectors for whatever reason, it could also be they're older workers and they could be exploited, so the government may be stepping in to protect them, right, or to bargain on their behalf in terms of wages. Then I think it's fine, right? But I'm for minimum wage, and I believe that that will be the baseline, and that it's an ethical issue that we have to look at and not just crunch the numbers, right? Thanks for having me here. Oh yeah, I know. 1,008. I think they came out with an amount 1,008, if I'm not wrong. Oh, okay. Mm, 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 mm. I think Terry, yeah. I think most people cannot hear you, you know.
Sorry.
Mm.
Okay, sorry.
So I think we have the sound problem coming back.
I see. Okay, so
Anyway, we're wrapping up already.
okay. So I'm wrapping up. Okay. Sorry, I cut down just now so to not to spoil Martin's point. Okay, maybe I just rephrase a bit. Okay, the most important point, when it comes to this minimum wage, right, is the commitment. Is the commitment to the idea of having a minimum wage, because it makes no sense to be arguing on whether or not $9 per hour, or is it $15 per hour, or looking at the Australia $20 hour as the crux, because then you'll be arguing over something that has not happened, or it is something that is not because Singapore is a very unique market, so you cannot say that what happens overseas will happen in Singapore. But what is very clear from the discussion is that Singapore needs a minimum wage or something similar to ensure that the local workers, the locals who are based here, who are going to spend the rest of their life staying here in Singapore and retire here, is going to have the sense of security that they're going to earn enough to save up and then to live in relative comfort. Because currently, I think everyone, right, is lacks the kind of security that they would be cared for. They are able to care for themselves in the next couple of decades, especially with the rising age of life expectancy. Yes. So is
Okay.
so sorry about the.
I think I may have to speak because they can't hear you.
No.
So
I have already adjusted the sound. Yeah, so they can hear me. So that's why you don't see the complaints that.
Okay.
Yeah. So just now there wasn't.
I think you have to look at that mic because 2 weeks ago when
it's not the mic because there's I can adjust things on my side. So Martin, you can hear me properly.
I can hear you.
The only thing that is just is the volume that goes out to the audience. So because we are so for the audience who are not aware, we are having a Zoom meeting. So my mic is connected directly, whereas for this outstream is actually through another program. So if Martin can hear, doesn't mean that you all can hear. Yeah, if you all can hear, doesn't mean Martin can hear. Yeah. So that's the thing. So is there any questions from the audience? Because I don't see much points. Because if not, then we will just conclude for today.
Oh, anyway, our food has arrived. I was going to take outside.
I believe there's no point. Okay. So have you seen the discussion? Have you seen the discussion from the adjournment motion that was filed by Patrick Tay?
Oh yeah. I heard it's basically what we spoke about 2 weeks ago, more or less, about PMEs,
I was really impressed by Mr. Tay's with sharing of experience from the local workers who have faced discrimination in their work.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, but I am equally I was conversely disappointed by the new manpower minister basically brushing off what concerns that the 3 MPs have voiced and saying that the manpower ministry have put enough effort for the past 2 decades. If Singapore workforce is facing the problem today, right, despite 2 decades of hard work by the MOM, right, then something's really wrong, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. So yes.
Post-mortem.
Yes. So we would.
The food has arrived.
Yes.
It was fine.
So yes. So we would end today's session and hope everyone have enjoyed today's live chat with us and Mr. Martin Gabriel.
Yeah,
Thank
good.
you.
Thanks for inviting
Good night.
me.
Yes.
Terry, thank you
Yes.
so much for
Yes.
all your inputs.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Okay. Bye, everyone.